Hello everybody, how are you all? Hi there, hope you can all hear me. I'll just check. How is everyone? I'll just check that you can hear me before I continue. Hi Patricia. Hi Connie, hi Valerie. Oh brilliant, thanks Connie, that's great. I can continue. Hi Josephine, how are you? Lovely to have you here. Apologies for the little delay. I've got myself in a right pickle this morning. Then I have to go and wash my hands. Playing with the interference inks, my hands were absolutely covered today, so I thought, let's go and wash them, start afresh, so I can make another mess. Do you all find that you get yourself into such a state when you're crafting that you suddenly look up and your desk is absolutely covered and piled with absolutely everything, and then you think to yourself, hang on a minute, let's just put it all away, restart, and then start again. So no doubt my fingers will be an inky mess again by the end of this, but hey ho, that's all the fun of what we're doing, isn't it? So thanks to having everybody here. Hi Karen from Germany. Hi Deborah. Hi Patricia and Evelyn. Hi Mum. How's you? There's Kathy and Patricia. Oh, another Patricia. There's Jean and Andrea and Josephine. Lots of familiar names there. Lovely to have you all here. And Anne. And I saw Helen sneak in at the top here. We have Margaret with us as well. Kathy, oh, Marion. Marion's a regular, of course. And yeah, my sister Helen is here. Hello. And Grandma Bonnie. How are you? Lovely to have you here. And Hazel. Now we have Hazel Pearson here following, and I have Hazel sitting in the conservatory also. You may well hear her by the end of the day, or by the end of the hour. No doubt she's been quite vocal this morning. She's actually been quite a lucky girl this week. Fortunately, it's been dry enough for me to pop out and actually get her out and walk her every day without getting soaked. Unlike last week, every time we took her out last week, we got absolutely drenched, the two of us. So I got a little bit fed up with that. But no, we've enjoyed a nice walk every day, actually, this so far. Okay, let's get going. So before we start, just a little reminder that until Sunday midnight, we have Lisa's pick on the website, which is for this week an amazing deal on the first release of the interference ink. So the interference inks volume 1, there's 12 in the set. They are at an amazing price of 68, well, just under 68 pounds. So you're saving 22 pounds 50 or 22 pounds 48, but included in that bonus, you are also getting one of the 3 ink pad holders free as well, and that's worth £15.99. So if you're unsure of what the inks do and how they're different to the normal blending inks, I'll try and show you today. I did do a live on Tuesday where hopefully I was able to catch the beauty of the mica, and I put a little reel up from a card that I made on Tuesday just to try and show you the interference and the colour changing properties of the ink as well. Dawn also done her live on Monday where she was able to blend an ink onto black card, which obviously changes the colour of the ink as well. I'm using them again today, and what I want to try and show you is, and I can just show you that mica there in the background. I've used all the inks I've used here, bar the sentiment. I've used the interference ink. So I want to show you that you can use them blending through stencils. So the set I'm using today doesn't have an embossing folder included with it, but all your regular layering stencil and embossing folder collections you'll be able to use your interference inks with. And also I've wanted to show you like an ombre effect again. I showed you a different ombre effect the on Tuesday, but I want to show you like a full page one and actually blend in a couple of different colours of ink to create this background. So I wanted to show you that also today. And if I'm just as I'm moving that, you can see in the background, particularly here, you have that the colour change mica that's in there. So although the ink is pink, we have that interference ink, or the interference mica, which gives you that gold sheen, and the sheen and the interference colour changes depending on the ink colour of the ink pad. So for anyone who is unfamiliar, and apologies, I know we do get new viewers all the time, so I do just want to make everybody aware, because if you're watching this at a later date, even though the offer may not be applicable at that stage, the inks are a staple of Lisa's catalogue, so these will always be available. And I just want to show you the swatch that I made of the inks here. So these are all the colours. We have 12 colours all in all. So if I hold that still, if you want to read those, you can just stop the video if you're watching this back. Excuse the ink thing, the ink, the water drop there. So if just as I turn this, you will see that interference colour on each of those. So you can see on this colour here, the crushed velvet, you have the interference of the gold, which is really pretty. But if you then look at, say, let's move that into the light. How can I catch that? Slightly tricky. The pink champagne, for example, if you catch that in the light, the interference is actually more silvery. The interference on this colour here, which is a lovely coral cherry bomb, it's called, but the interference in that is also a pink colour as well. So they are beautiful. They really do need to be seen to be believed. And if I just show you them on black, you can see the initial colour is far less visible, but you can see colour. But it's not until you turn these inks to the light when they're on black that you see the full beauty of that colour change ink. And these two sheets, or the crib sheets here, the swatch sheets, correspond to each other. So you can see, if I hold that, you'll be able to just find the corresponding ink from the white onto the black, and you'll see how different they are. The one in question, really, I'd say the Sapphire Gold, sitting here on the white and sitting here on the black. Just how different they look. Okay, so let's get on with the stenciling and the making. So we've introduced those, and it's really nice actually that Lisa's able to highlight these products in a pick of the week, which means we focus on them in the videos. But it then does mean that we are building up a video catalogue for you to refer back to on YouTube. So say any newcomers to us and to our channel will always have something to refer back to. So what I'm using today is the multi-layer blossoming lily. It's in stock at the moment. It's a one-stop set, really, I would say, because bar the embossing folder, which this doesn't have, you basically have stencils, dies, and stamps in this. So you can use this to, it's a complete set to make a card. So we have the layering stencils, which, as we know and love from Lisa, you can create all of these images. So the leaves individually, these individual flowers, and the larger flowers. So we have the individual layering stencils. There's 4 of those. Now, as I say, we don't have an embossing folder with this, but we do have the dies that can cut out each of these elements. And then if you want to add extra detail or just use the detail in itself, we do have the stamps. Let's get a piece of white card, there we are. We do have the stamps with these also, and we have the sentiments. So that's why I would say it's a pretty much self-contained kit, because you do have the sentiments that go with it. So you can just have this if you want it as a taster of what Lisa can offer, this will give you the chance to make a complete Lisa Horton card from start to finish. What we also have in this, we have a little booklet which just explains to you how it works and just gives you a breakdown of the layers. So it gives you an idea on how to choose your colours to build up this image, and that's a really useful set. So this is one of the sort of the first sets with layering stencils, and this was just a real, you know, a guide to get you going before we were able to create all the videos as a library for you to look back on. So that's basically, this is pretty much predominantly what I've used to create the card. Again, what I'm really wanting to do is sort of focus on how to use the inks. So also to just finish this card, I've created the aperture, and what I've used to create the aperture and the embossing folder around the outside is the C6 or the A6 embossing folder called the Torn Aperture. This also has the die within it to create this really lovely shaped, unusual aperture for you. And the oval that I've stamped the sentiment onto there is the nested stitched bubble ovals. Now, apologies, I didn't do any slides for today. As I say, the time ran away with me this morning. That happens sometimes, doesn't it, when you get a little bit engrossed in what you're doing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move that to one side. I have the inks out that I'm using. Let me just, I may use a couple more. I may actually introduce a yellow for the stems. I'm not quite sure yet, but we'll see how we go with that. So the inks I'm using today are Crushed Velvet, the Pink Champagne, Magic Garden and Galaxy Dream. So these are all from the Interference range. They are all blending inks. They all have a shimmer to them. They are a dye and pigment ink as well, so they are very wet ink pads. So if you wanted to emboss over the top of them, you possibly could with a clear embossing powder to set them. Now what am I going to start with? I think what I'll do, I'm going to use my Ultimate One today because I want to use the stamping platform, because I do want to show you how to use the complete set. So I will use the stamps for this as well. I'm only going to stencil this larger flower for you today. And what I found after playing around, I find it easier to actually stamp the flower first and then line up the stencils over the top of that. Let me just bring your comments back up. Lisa does say thank you and choose the agent. Absolutely, you don't have to use all the layers. And I've shown that in many of my other lives before, actually, with other stencils, and it sort of depends on the day with whatever I'm choosing. I don't actually use all the layers all the time, or I use some of the layers as backgrounds and I use them in a different way as well. Right, so as I say, what I want to do is stamp the flower first, and then I can line up the stencils over the top of that. Sorry, I'm just finding my stamps. I've tidied them away. So I'm going to use the largest flower, and I haven't used it on here, but I will probably use these smaller flowers a little bit later on once I've created the background, and I'll sort of do tone on tone stamping just to add a little bit of extra patterning to the background there. And where am I going to put that? There we are. Get my desk organised for you. There you go. I'll put that there so you can see that. So I am going to stamp my flower about there, and I'm going to hold my cardstock in place with the magnets. Now, when you're using the Ultimate One as a stamping platform, what I would say is it doesn't matter so much with the larger stamps, but try and stay away from the pegs that you have at the top here, because sometimes, depending on the thickness of the stamp that you're using, these can sometimes stop the stamp pressing down and you don't always get a full image. So try and keep your stamped images sort of further away or more in the centre of the stamping platform, and you'll be much happier with the results like that. So I'm just going to pick up the stamp there. Now, this particular one I stamped in 2 colours. I stamped with the green for the leaves and I stamped with the Galaxy Dream for the actual flower. That turned out a little bit dark for me. I want it to be just a little bit more tonal. So I think what I might do, I might stamp with the pink shimmer. You can't actually see that under there, can you? Let me bring in a piece of copy paper. I'm only putting this underneath my stamping platform so you can see the stamp. There you go. So I'm going to ink the flower with the interference ink, so the pink champagne. And I'm just going to stamp the flower part of this first. Now I'm pressing down. I'm not pressing down too hard at this stage, and I fully accept that I may have to come back in with that pink again just to make sure I have a really nice impression. But I would rather do that and stamp a couple of times lightly than really sort of squash the image and have a blurred image. So I think it's better, and you might as well make the use of the fact that the stamping platform allows you to do this by allowing you to stamp a couple of times and build up the ink slowly so you have a really nice crisp image of the stamp. Now I'm going to come in and stamp again, but this time I'm just going to ink the leaves with the green. And again, I'm just tapping the stamp very gently. Now these ink pads are less felty than the other blending inks. They're quite spongy, so what you do need to make sure is when you're inking the stamp that you don't really push it down, because what that will do, it will actually flood in between the higher regions of the stamp with ink, and that will then give you a less clear image of. So it's always worth to go really, really gently, literally just tap the top of it, just really, really gently. Come in and stamp that, and then if you find you do need to build up these lines to be crisper, more solid, just come back in again and build it up this way, really, really gently. See, I'm just touching that with, no pressure at all. And so I really can't stress that enough, just so gently, and just come in and don't put your full weight on top of the stamping platform so it really bows. Just really gently. If you find it tricky, you can use your fist just to add that little bit of pressure. Again, not too much, but just so you can feel the stamp touching the cardstock underneath. Or you can, if you have a stamping block, that may just help you sort of distribute the pressure, and we can just put that over the top. So use your stamping, your acrylic block the way you would do if it had a stamp on it, but obviously because we're not relying on it for the image, it does make it a lot easier. So I just need to come in again and just make sure I get that edge of that leaf. So we have a really nice clear impression of that flower there, and it also shows you that you can stamp perfectly well with the interference inks also. So if you wanted to stamp a sentiment with the interference inks to coordinate, or you just wanted something a little bit different, then again, if you're using the stamping platform, just ink up gently. I think that will give a really lovely effect as well. So I've just taken my stamp off of there. My platform is filthy, dear me. Okay. So I think what I might do, I'm going to stick with this platform as opposed to swapping and changing. Move my magnets. Let me just show you that we have a really nice stamped image, and you could actually use that as it is. Come in with your die. You could cut that out as is, and if you wanted to, you could colour that yourself. Or you can use it as is if you stamped onto coloured card. you wouldn't need to do any layering or stenciling or colouring. You can just, you know, that would be good to go. I think that is actually a really pretty image as it is, particularly as it's stamped in colour. And where I've overlapped with the pink and the green here, you've got slightly different colours going on. So it's actually a really nice image. And actually what I see when I see things like that now, it then sort of conjures up lots of different ideas for me. And there we are, you can see here Hazel in the background. I know her too well. Okay, right, so what we can do, we can actually start with our stenciling now. Now, as I say, we have 4 stencils, and on each of the this stencil also allows us to stamp or stencil the leaves and the extra flowers as well. I shan't be doing those today, but you can stencil and do the whole lot all at once. Now, because of the way I've added this to my cardstock, you're going to notice that the stencil and the cardstock are going to be a bit skew with, and it does overlap the peg holes there. So all I'm going to do, because I know I'm going to be die cutting this later, I'm just going to trim the cardstock away so I can line up my image to the stencil. Like so. And then pop that onto my pegs to have the benefit of everything being held in place. And I'm going to use my magnets there just to keep that in place. And excuse my head. Somebody did mention that it'd be nice to put a face to the name and to the voice. Well, maybe one day I will, but at the moment you'll just be seeing the top of my head. Unfortunately. There we go. So I'm just going to line that up. And I would suggest, if you want to do all elements on this stencil, I would do the flower first, especially if you want to stamp them, actually. This only applies if you want to stamp. I would do the elements separately. I would do the flower first, then I would do these two elements together because they line up, and then these 2 elements together because they line up. That's only if you want to stamp them, or because that was the way that I found that worked best this morning. So I've lined up my flower there the best that I can. Okay, so now we can actually get stenciling. Here we go. So as I say, the flower, it's very pink, this card, which is very unusual for me, but I know Connie is here. I don't know if Dawn's here or not, but I know, Connie, you're a purple fan, and I'm sure there's many of you others that are. And also, actually, because I'm inking with the interference inks, I'm using sponges. So it's not often you actually see me create with sponges. Normally, I do this with the brushes. So I don't have any brushes that are set for these colours. I think I said that on Tuesday. So it'll also be like an interesting for you to actually see this come together using sponges as well. So I've got a brand new sponge on here, and you can see that I can see this, that as I pick this up, this ink pad is so juicy. So what I've done, I've made sure that I've got a plastic blending mat here just to take a lot of that ink off. So I've got a lot more control of it. You can use copy paper as well if you wanted to. So I'm just going to start off the edge and work into the flower here. Now, let's make sure that my ink is really nicely. You sort of have to prime these sponges, really, particularly when you've got really inky pads like this. I find it a lot easier when your pad is sort of saturated. There we are. So the ink won't be quite as scratchy. Okay, so we'll just start blending that on, and it's really light circles round and round in the same way as you would do a brush. Actually, it really is no different. But what I do always say when I'm blending with these sponges is that I never blend with the sponge directly onto the cardstock like that. I'm always holding my sponge at an angle like that, and that is how I blend. Now, when you're using the blending brushes, I'll just bring one in, the blending brushes, Lisa has already shaped these for us, and you can see that these don't lay flat, they do have a curve in them. So that is what I'm replicating when I'm holding my blending sponge at an angle like that. It gives you a lot more control, and it enables you to create quite an ombre effect. And I think when people are using sponges for the first time, they get a little bit despondent because they can't always get the nice blend. And I always say, just keep the blending sponge at an angle to your paper. So even when I'm going round and round, I'm constantly moving my sponge like that, so it's never ever, or very rarely, flat to my page. And that's how I can get this really nice blend. And as you can see, as I'm working that round, that's becoming as smoother and smoother as I go. So before I move on from this layer, I also need to put the colour in for the leaves. So I'm just doing the same again, just making sure that my ink is blended nicely onto my sponge, and then I can come in and colour those leaves like so. And again, I'm doing exactly the same. I'm making sure that my sponge isn't completely flat to the cardstock, and I'm able to get that control to add the colour to the leaves. There we are. So we have a nice blend going on there. Now, obviously, if you was doing all these other areas, then you would carry on with the colours. So we have a really nice blend going on. So I come in with stencil number 2, and I'm going to go back in with the green first. And again, I'm just going to pick up a lot of ink. I'm going to make sure that we have as much of a ombre blend as going on as I can. Now remember that these are the interference inks, completely blendable, just like the matte blending inks, and that's what I really want to show you today, is that you can create those soft ombre blends and shading as you, in the same way as you would do with your matte blending inks. And if you are using brushes with these, the smallest white stencil brushes, then again you will have that control, and you absolutely can create those lovely shaded effects. So I'm going to do it, come in with the purple there. Do I want to use purple or pink? No, I'm going to use purple. Sorry, that's me talking out loud. So I'm going to add the details to the flower. Now we have some very delicate areas here, so I'm going to have to be quite mindful so I don't scrub too much, because otherwise they can sort of go a little bit aligned. And again, I think I've said this in other lives. It doesn't take much just to be that little bit careful, but what it does do, and what Lisa has given us, is to give us that fantastic intricate detail. But it's what we do have to be sometimes just mindful that these certain areas of certain stencils are quite delicate. But I say, it's once you know the range, and once you know that Lisa does give us these details, it's not too much of an issue, is it? To just be just a little bit careful just with some areas of your stencil. And you can see there just how much detail that is giving us, intricate detail. Oh, stencils here. So stencil number 3. Now this one, I think I might try and introduce a bit of yellow into this. So also I'm going to use the pink champagne. Oh, Angel, don't know what she's seeing. So the pink champagne, I'm coming in quite dark just to get that really nice detail in there. I hope there's nobody coming to the door. Okay, and I think what I might do, I'm just going to bring in a sweet treat, because what I want to try and do is just add a little bit of yellow to these stems here. Okay. And because I'm blending yellow over pink, it might turn out to be more orange, but that's fine. It's just a nice contrast. Now, what you might find is that these stamens are just a little bit off centre to the stencil. Now, what you can do is just move that slightly, just so as they fit into the stencil image. What you can do then in a second, I know I've altered it just slightly, but just to realign it up in a second, we can just move those back. You're going to have these other stencils that you can use just to realign that a little bit, so that that's not an issue. And there we are, we just move that back into position, so the majority of the flower hits that alignment there. Okay, and I'll just make sure I get those areas there with the yellow. And then obviously we have areas on the leaf here that we need to get into the design. So I'm going to come really heavy in onto these leaf details with the green. And then, now this may look really scary. I'm using a little bit of the Galaxy Dream. It's basically a really dark blue on white, and it turns purple onto black. But this really dark blue, I'm not going to pick up any more ink. I'm just going to see what I've got left on my sponge and just add a little layer to these areas on the leaves. And that's just going to add that tiny little bit of shading and just darken those details on the leaves just slightly, because we only have the one green in this particular set. We do need that contrast just to add that little bit of shading. And obviously if you layer a blue over a green, you're going to get a nice area of shading. So that does work on there, and you can see that these details on the leaves have darkened just slightly. So I'm coming in with stencil number 4. This is where I just need to alter the layer there, mainly because I had to alter the position, didn't I, for those stamens, the yellow sections. But now we're all back on track, and I'm going to come in with the crushed velvet. So this, I want to make the purple really, really dark. So I'm going to come full on with this crushed velvet to bring those details out into these areas of the flower, like so. Actually, I could have used the ink off of here, couldn't I? There's so much ink sitting there. Okay. And that's the last layer that we have for this flower, and you can see how that's really come together. And the, oh, my stomach's rumbling. And it also shows you how well we can blend with these interference inks, because I say, as a design team, our preference usually to go to, mainly because we've got so much choice and we can't use everything all the time, we would go to the blending inks, the matte blending inks for our stenciling. But the interference inks do work just as well, and obviously then we get the added beauty of the mica when we turn that to the light. So now what we can do, we can die cut this out, and I will do this one because I want to use this one on the card. Again, the die cuts correspond perfectly with our stenciled image, and obviously stamped image again this time. Now we also have the choice. I stamped today because I wanted to show you how well they go together, but if you didn't want to stamp the image and you purely wanted to stencil it, then that image would work just as well. You don't have to stamp, but it is nice to have that choice, isn't it? particularly when in these sets we don't have the embossing folder, which I don't think, you know, we are so used to it, but you don't always need that emboss. There we are, just put that through. Just the one time, we don't need to do any more. Okay, so we can take that away. Now I've stayed much cleaner this time. I had ink all over the place before. Now I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but actually even against the dark background, the colours are stunning, aren't they? You can just about see a little bit of that mica coming through. You can see a little bit of a sheen. Now obviously as that ink dries, that the mica comes to the fore a lot more, and in real life you'll be able to see that. Okay, so that's our flower. So now we need to think about sort of creating this background, and I want to show you that we can actually create an ombre effect. So I've already cut myself a piece of card, and I'm going to get myself a blending mat. You can use a messy mat, anything that you're happy to blend onto, and something that the ink moves really nicely onto. So the messy mats, the white messy mats, like the 12, I think they're 12 or 13, 14 by 14 inches, I think they are. They would be absolutely perfect. You can choose any colour for the background. Say I'm going full on purple this week. Why not? Let's do something different. So my base for this colour is going to be pink champagne, because I can then create a lighter area and then I'll be able to layer ink to go darker. So that pink champagne, this one here, is the perfect sort of in between. There's an awful lot of card to cover, which is fine. The inks are perfectly capable of doing this. But to make that easier, I'm going to go with a direct to paper. Now this is where, if you don't like messy hands when you're blending, it might be an idea to put some gloves on. I've got myself a piece of copy paper just to make sure I don't put my my fingers in the ink. Try and keep myself a bit tidy. But to cover half of this card to start with, and easily, I'm going to use the direct to paper. So it's basically taking the ink pad and pulling that along, or pushing that onto the cardstock, and you're wiping the ink from the pad onto the paper, and you continue until you've got the area covered. Now I'm only going to use half because I want to sort of really blend this out. It is scary, there's an awful lot of ink there, but you will use a lot of this. This is when I then come in with my sponge. I'm using my copy paper just to hold this in place. And now this is when you're going to really even out a lot of this blending. So a lot of this brush stroke that you've got here will be able to be worked out. Now I will pick up more ink, and at this time I am going and putting the sponge perfectly square on to the cardstock, because I want to get as much ink from the ink pad onto the cardstock as possible. Now I'm going over what I've already done, because that creates a much smoother blend. And I'm picking up more ink. I'm softening this line that's here. And then what I'll do, I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to start using this ink. So none of this is going to be wasted. This is where your copy paper comes invaluable, because otherwise you're going to be picking up all this ink with your fingers. And then I'm going to use what's left here and start bringing this onto the cardstock. And this is where your ombre effect is going to happen. I'm picking up the ink and I'm starting at the sides and working and filling in all of this white area. I'm not picking up more ink here because I don't want the intensity of the colour, because we have that down the other end of the cardstock. And as I say, unlike blending through the stencil, my pad is now fully square on to my cardstock, and I'm really working every available bit of ink from my sponge and the blending mat here onto my cardstock. And the more that you go round and round and round, you know, circular motions, the smoother blend is going to be onto the cardstock here. So you can see we do have a line, don't worry about that. You can either take some more ink from here and just keep working that in backwards and forwards along this line. But do remember, I'm going to die cut into this and emboss, so a lot of this will be disguised. So if I pick that up now, even on a dull day, just look at that golden sheen. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that stunning? Yeah, I could look at that all day. So I'm going to turn that round. So this is going to be the top of my cardstock. This is the lighter area. So now I can introduce another colour. So this is where I'm going to come in with the crushed velvet. Pick up a lot of ink again. And I'm going to... I want a band in the centre because I want the bottom to be really dark. So I'm going to work from the sides into the pink area. And you can see already that we've created like a shadow area. Now, because this ink is really, really... That's why you need the ink holders so they don't keep jumping. So there we are. You can see how that is sitting on there. Don't worry about that. The ink is so wet that if you keep blending this backwards and forwards, and you'll feel how wet this is, and then you'll sort of feel the ink dry and move less as you blend it, and that colour really starts blending into the colour that's on the card. So you can see the crushed velvet sitting on top of the pink champagne initially, but the more I go in circular motions and go backwards and forwards, I'm not putting too much pressure on, to be fair. I'm just continuing that motion, and again my sponge is flat to the card at this stage, and you can see that I have created a shadow because we've still got the pink champagne here, pink champagne at the top, and we do have that darker shade in the centre. Now I'm just going to soften this line at the top here, not by adding any more ink, but just going around, you know, circular motions, and that just softens that, and that's what leads to that nice gradual ombre incline. Now, this is where I'm going to use the Galaxy Dream. It doesn't look it, but the undertones to the Galaxy Dream here has got colours that blend beautifully with these two. So I'm picking up my ink. This may look scary, looks really dark, but circular motions, move that onto your cardstock, and you now see that we are creating that darker shadow. We only want a little area. We don't need it to be too much. But again, just work that round and round. Don't put too much pressure on because, as you saw there, your cardstock may buckle a little bit. But that is also because this is now holding a lot of ink, so it's a lot. It's not a lot compromised, but obviously when you add ink, the paper's going to get a little bit wetter, isn't it? So it does make it a little bit softer. But just use your copy paper just to hold that in place. Now I don't need to pick up any more ink. We have the darkest area at the bottom, and just along this line here where the pink and the purple sort of really meet, just keep going around in circular motions, and that will really blend, and you'll get that really nice smooth ombre effect. It's a bit like, I always liken it to blending makeup. Now I don't wear makeup, but when I've watched various things on sort of YouTube rabbit holes that I go down, you see people blending. This is how they do that, and it's very much the same when you're working onto ink. So if I take that away now, you see we have that. We have three distinct colours, but they're blended beautifully. And then what you do need to do is to, I mean, you can continue working that. You can get that almost seamless. But I don't necessarily think you need to do that, because if you're die cutting this or embossing it, these areas then do get disguised. Now I think what I might do, which I didn't do on the previous one, I'm going to take one of these stamps and we can just do some tone on tone stamping in the background. So I'm just taking one of the flower stamps there and just putting it onto an acrylic block. You can put this on a stamping platform if that's what you find easier, but you don't need the precision stamping. So I shall start with the crushed velvet and just gently, conscious you can't see that, let's put that onto the white there. You never know what background to use. There you go. So I'm going to stamp that just gently and just randomly start stamping into the background. Now I can see where that has stamped. I shall show you in a second. You'll be surprised at how actually visible that is. As I start coming into the lighter, you'll start seeing it more. But we don't want this to be in your face stamping. We want this just to have that lovely tonal, subtle background. Yeah, you can't see that. Bear with me. I shall just stamp that again. And then I shall show you. Now, as this dries, it will be, it fades into the background. But because of the micro properties of that ink, there we go. And the fine line of the stamp, you're going to get a really lovely effect. Where can I get? There you go. Can you see it just sitting there? How pretty is that? And that is where we're really getting or taking advantage of the beauty of these ink pads. So as I'm looking at this now, those stamped images are really actually fading into the background. I'm just going to take off that ink there and I'm going to swap to the pink champagne because we go into the lighter area. This is more pink champagne up here, isn't it, as opposed to the crushed velvet. So it'd be more tonal, but again, it's going to be really highlighted when it catches the light. So we should do that again. Now you can see there, if I can just catch that light. As it dries, the ink catches more. I can't get the top ones there for you, but it's definitely there. It's gone really dark. There we go, you can see the bottom ones. It's so tricky, that's why it's so hard to photograph these for you, even the design team, because the beauty of what I can see here is really hard to catch on the camera. Now, I've already done the die cutting and the embossing for this background. And in my haste to get all sort of organised, I've already stuck this down as well. So I've got myself in a right old pickle. So basically, this background here was created in exactly the same way as I've done this one here for you. And I've used before I stuck it all down, I've used the die cut to cut the aperture. So this is from the torn aperture embossing folder with the die included. So I've used the aperture to die cut from the purple layer. I've also lined, when I die cut this coloured layer, I lined up the dark matten layer and the front of the cardstock also, of the card blank. And I was able to cut all three layers together. That way I knew that the aperture for each of the layers is going to match up. I've mounted this coloured layer onto a piece of vellum, and I've actually given this a matten layer. You don't have to do that. I thought it might just be a nice design feature for this particular stage. Hopefully you can see it. I'm just going to see if I can lighten my camera a little bit because it's gone really dark outside. No, it's good. I need to put the lights on really. Bear with me 2 ticks. I wonder if I can do that. If I can perhaps put the lights on. because it's suddenly gone really dark everywhere. Oh, let's just let me see if I can put the lights on. Let me see. Nope, they're not working. They're not wanting to work today. There we go. Let's put my Wi-Fi on. Bear with me 2 minutes. Hopefully this will. That one will come on in a second. Hopefully, let's put my phone back. There we are. Let's put a bit of light on the subject there, so you can actually see that a little bit better now, can't you? There we are. So what was I saying? Yes. So I lined up. Bit delayed reaction there. So the the purple layer, the grey layer, and the front of the cardstock. I cut the aperture for those all at once. I layered my inked layer onto a piece of vellum. And now what I can do, when I put this onto the grey layer, I can hold it up to the light and you can see where the apertures line up. But if you've done that right, your matte layer should give that to you as well. Okay, so I'm going to do that now, and actually sandwiching the vellum in between the two matte layers obviously hides the adhesive behind. Now you can keep the aperture open, you don't need to add vellum. If you don't have vellum to hand, you don't need to do that, but I think it just creates a nice little design thing, doesn't it? So we can. Do I stamp on this before I add that down? No, I don't think I will. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud again. I must stop doing that really. So I'm going to now add this layer onto the card blank. So I'm going to add my glue again. When you've got an aperture, always make sure you put glue around the aperture, because you will find that it gapes a little otherwise. And that just sort of keeps everything nice and intact. Now I'm going to open the card and just make sure that those apertures are lined up with each other. You can either do that from the back or you can hold it up to the light. So there we are. Now you can see here, this card, this inked layer was meant to be on this card. I picked up the wrong thing and put the wrong layers together. So that's why we have the hello on there. I didn't actually like the way that turned out, so I am going to cover that over in a second. But we have basically the front of the card there. Now we can decide where we're going to position our flower onto this. Now, but before I do that, I've used the nested bubble ovals just to create myself a matte layer, and this is what I'm going to stamp the sentiment onto. Now I've die cut a layer in vellum, so it'd be the same vellum as we have here, so the same, it's the pink vellum, so it is tonal, and a larger oval of white cardstock. So that will sit on the front like so. Now I can just figure out where I want to put that flower on there. So I think I might have that sitting just like that. This obviously is overlapping, so in a second I'm going to cut that down. Actually, let's do that now. So I'm just holding that in place. Now, as I say, I've chosen to use the Torn Aperture embossing folder. You can use any of the embossing folders, but I think there's so many beautiful backgrounds that would work for this. And equally, if you try this also, you don't necessarily have to use this lily stamp. You can use any one of your other floral designs that are embossed as well. So I say it's a really straightforward card. Really, I just wanted to show you the properties and how well we can use the interference inks to create a card as well. So we need to stamp something on there, don't we? So I'm going to take my stamp plate. Here we are. There's lots of lovely sentiments on this one, actually. I think we have hugs on there. I think I might just take the hello. I can just stamp that in the centre there. I've used the hello underneath, so I think it would work nicely if we do that. I'm going to use a black VersaFine ink because I know that I'll be able to stamp onto vellum and this will dry nicely. So it won't dry immediately. So I do need to be a little bit careful, but I do know that it will eventually dry onto vellum. So I'll just stamp that onto there. I've attached the vellum onto this white layer just with 2 dots of glue. Now I can't see them actually. They've actually quite dried quite well and hidden. But what I will do, I'm just going to add another bit of glue that correspond to the dots of glue underneath. And I'm going to pop 2 pearls over the top there, just to hide any of the glue, because it's always an issue, isn't it, when we stick in vellum. But if we can hide the adhesive, that makes life a lot easier. And things always look better with a pearl or 2 on there, don't they? It's been a while since I've used those, actually. Now, I couldn't be making more of a dawn card if I tried, really, could I, with the pinks and the purples and the pearls. And even Connie, I think Connie, you're still with us? And I'm sure there's other purple fans here as well. Oh, right, I'm just going to slide that down. There we are. So we can have that nestled. Now, you can see here, you don't necessarily need to use the whole of the flower. It'd be really nice to stamp a sentiment on the inside, or you can use a couple of the other stamped images, which I have here. I've already reused. You can use them just to line the inside of the... Oh, I need to put that on, don't I? Okay, let's just add that to the front of the card. There we go. So we can use these images on the inside to make a really nice insert also, and that can frame a sentiment on the inside. You'll be able to see a little sneak peek of that through the aperture there. So that's today's card. So nothing really out there as far as card design goes, but I really did want to show you and let you see how you can use these interference inks, because they're beautiful. All the techniques that you use for your normal matte blending inks are just enhanced when you use these interference inks. See if I can show you that now. Yeah. So you get quite mesmerised by them. So let me turn on the comments again. So I do apologise. I'm not very good at watching what you're all saying. Okay, what colour did you use on the original card for the lily? The original card, I've used these colours again, minus the sweet treat. So I've used these all the way along. It looks different because I have the yellow on there, and I think I just used various different amounts of ink. It looks like actually on this one I used more of the pink champagne and possibly less on this one, but it's definitely crushed velvet, pink champagne, and Magic Garden for the leaves as well. So they're pretty much the same across the board, just different ways of blending. So each time you do them, they do look quite different. Like the Aperture 3D folder. Yes, that adds a really lovely detail around your aperture, and it's nice. I mean, if you don't have that, then obviously you can use any of your nesting dies, your nesting ovals, squares or circles to create an aperture as well. But see if I can just show you that detail there, that embossed detail. Yeah, you can always add an ink pad over the top of that to highlight those folded back pieces as well. Yeah, it's just a really nice detail. What cardstock did I use, Linda? I always use Lisa's Super Smooth cardstock. I tend to buy it in bulk, and every time I do any inking, I always use that. Then obviously the vellum is from the sweet. It's from the floral set. What's it called? Modern Florals. There we are, Modern Florals, which I think was just recently on TV. I don't know if the vellum was, but that's the vellum from that set there. You get 6 different colours, and a grey cardstock is just sort of bulk standard I have in my craft room as well. So, Kathy likes purple too. I knew that there'd be some other purple lovers in here as well, other than Connie. So thanks for all your comments, everyone. It's lovely. Oh, Margaret Jones likes purple. Yeah, I thought there was. It's not that I don't dislike purple. You just always have your colours to go to, don't you? Mine's generally sort of blues and yellows and greens. So yeah, it's nice to do something a bit different today. Brightens it up as well, doesn't it? So thanks for sticking with me this afternoon. I've enjoyed my lives with you this week. Hopefully, if you've been on the fence about the interference inks, we've managed to sort of explain them to you. I should be back with you next week, as will Dawn. I believe there's no live from Lisa this Friday, but she may well pop in with sort of little snippets for us as well. But if not, we'll definitely see you all back around there, and it'll be all back to normal next week. So thanks for joining me, everyone. Thanks for sticking with me. Enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend, and I shall see you next week. Take care.